I recently read this book called My Father Knew the Secret, Growing Up with Bob Proctor by his son, Brian Proctor. And I've just finished recording a podcast episode with Brian Proctor. Bob Proctor's work changed my life, helped me heal, helped me have a greater awareness of who I was as a person. So to be in the presence of his son, Brian, is insane. So for those of you who follow me and watch my videos, thank you so much. Honestly, I've been in the mirror just in a state of gratitude for about an hour. I'm so happy to just be in your presence. How are you, Brian?
I'm doing really good. And you know what? I'm happy to be here, Ben. It was, you know what? All it takes is just, you got to reach out, and you reached
Yeah.
out. So here we are.
When you replied to my email, you popped up on my For You page on TikTok. And when you replied to my email, I was like, oh, oh, okay, something is aligning us here. So thank you so much for being here today. Um, I will start off by just talking about briefly how I was introduced to your father, Bob Proctor. And I want to touch upon how he reminded me so much of my grandfather, Freddie. So, Freddie was a very spiritual being, and I don't think he could put it into words because people around him weren't the same. And he was the type of person who could sit in his garden and watch the sky and listen to the birds for hours and hours and hours. And as a child, I'm like, well, this is boring. But as an adult now, I could do the same thing with an understanding of consciousness, who we are, and as a collective. And it's bittersweet because it took my grandfather's passing for me to dive into this and discover spirituality itself and law of attraction and manifestation. And I wish that I could have had the conversations I have now with him. So it's bittersweet. But so in 2020, just briefly, in 2020, my grandfather Freddie passed, and I was the one who found him. And he was like my father, so it was a lot, and I had bad flashbacks. And then 5 months later, my actual father died, so it was a big year. And I thought, right, I'm in a dark place. I've got to get out of this. My wife was pregnant, so I just started reading, and I picked up 3 books. One was Just Effing Do It. One was The Teachings of Abraham by Esther and Jerry Hicks, and the other was a book that's basically a memory of your family at this point, which was Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, which I know your father truly adored. And he would read every single day, near enough. So I read these books and I picked them up just to learn about different things. And when I picked up Think and Grow Rich, it was to learn about money. Because I thought, if I get more money, that'll help. And then halfway through Think and Grow Rich, I was like, all of these books are about the same sort of thing here. So I just went down a sort of rabbit hole, and that summer I read 50 or 60 books. And what I'd done was I went onto YouTube and I typed in Law of Attraction, and there he was, Mr. Bob Proctor. And your father's work, his books that I have here, and his videos really did help change the direction of my life. And I don't want to say helped, they changed the direction of my life. So to have you in my virtual presence here is an absolute honor. I'm so happy that not only are you sharing the advice that I have in your book here from your father, but also your own, because you are, obviously, you're your own person and you have a lot of insight and advice to give too. So thank you so much. And if I can ask, what made you want to write this book?
Wow, that's a good question. You know, Ben, I started writing this book about 4 years ago. My father was alive when I started to write it. And I was talking with my wife, and I said to her, I said, you know, Dad always says that there's a book in all of us. And I have an urge to write something, but I'm not quite sure. You know, I gave her a couple of ideas of what I was thinking about. And she just looked at me and she says, Brian, she says, think of all the seminars that you're at, and all the people at all the seminars. The first thing they ask you is, what's it like being Bob Proctor's son? So I thought, wow, that's it. So I thought I can start to write about all the experiences I have as Bob Proctor's son, all the lessons that he taught me, everything he shared with me as his son to be a better person, to live a better life. So it was kind of a no-brainer. So that's when I started writing. And I let him know that I was writing the book. And he loved it. We had a lot of great chats around it. Certainly when certain topics would come up, I would ask his advice on this or that, or reminiscing a story from the past and what he remembered of it. And it really helped bring a lot of it together. I would share some of the paragraphs that I had written with him, and He just loved it. It was a great experience for us. We're both early morning people, so we could be up many days, 5 a.m. We'd be on the phone talking to each other about it. The only thing, Ben, I never had the title of the book. I had a few different ideas, but they just never felt like that was it. They seemed okay, but when they just didn't resonate. And Dad always said to me, he says, Brian, don't rush it. It'll come to you whenever it's supposed to come to you. And I thought, okay. And I look back on it now in retrospect, and I think, I think he knew he wasn't going to be here when I came out, which it does make me a little sad. I would have loved for him to have seen what is going on with this book and how it's being received. But anyways, he's not. And the title for the book came to me after my father passed away. I only just finished the book a few months ago. So it was almost 4 years in the making. But the title came to me about 6 months ago. I was having a vivid dream of my father. And it was about 3 o'clock in the morning. I woke up and it was bang, it was in my head. My father knew the secret. And I thought, wow, that's, it just, so I actually got up and wrote it down right away so that I wouldn't forget. At 3 in the morning, you can forget some things that kind of come to you. And I knew instantly that was it. It just felt good. The movie and the book, The Secret, propelled my father to a whole nother level. He was a founder of the personal development industry. I mean, he started teaching this stuff in the 1960s and 1970s when it was not a common thing, what it is today. But and he was always very successful. He was always big in the industry. But when that movie came out and he was one of the featured teachers in it, it propelled him to another level. It was after that he got on to Larry King Live, Ellen DeGeneres, lots of shows that really showed the world who Bob Proctor was. So I thought, wow, what a perfect way to title the book, kind of tie it all together. He was 72 years old when that happened. So, everybody thinks he was an overnight success. It was 60 years in the making, but
When I
anyways,
saw, when I saw you to cut you off there, when I saw you saying how he was a pioneer in the '60s even, and I remember seeing one of his interviews, and you could tell he was so onto something, and he knew it in his soul, and the people around him couldn't quite grasp it yet because he was like you said, the leader. And he said he had an interview about someone said, "Who are you?" And he said, "Bob is my name. That's not who I am." That's my favorite interview, and you could tell that he was pushing this because he knew it so well, because it worked so well for him. It's interesting as well how I said he reminded me so much of my grandfather, because before my grandfather passed, he had a checkup with the doctors, and he came home and he was never been happier, and he was singing and dancing. And my grandmother would say he was so much more romantic because the doctor gave him good news. He said he had like COPD in his lungs. Doctor said he was getting better, so he was singing every morning and he was hugging her, telling her he loved her. And then when he died and the paramedics came, they asked what stage of this disease he was at, and we said, "Oh, it's getting better." And the paramedics were like, "No, it doesn't get better." So we'll never know, but we think that the doctor gave him bad news and that he knew his time was coming to an end, and that's why he was happy, and he was singing to make everyone else happy, which is, again, later on we'll talk about the impression of increase there. But what caught my attention, something I pulled from your book here, is you summed your father up in the most perfect way. You said, Bob Proctor got you excited about your life and the possibilities before you. And if someone had to ask me to sum your father up, I couldn't put it better than that, because that's exactly how I felt reading his books and watching his work. You said in your book, which I'd like you to elaborate on if possible, because this is so important. You said, we are all expressions of the same power and can only attract what we are in harmonious vibration with.
right. Well, it all comes down to we become what we think about. That's kind of an age-old thing that's been, I've read that in books from like 1903. I mean, it's always come down to we become what we think about. And I think we've heard that so many times that we don't give it a lot of thought. And that was always a big thing my father taught. We really do become what we think about. Whatever we are giving energy to, we bring into our lives, good or bad.
Yes.
And most of the time, Ben, it's not intentional. We're giving thought to who knows what, or letting somebody else influence our thoughts. And whatever that is, negative or positive, we bring it into our life. And it's really as simple as that. We can overcomplicate these concepts.
Yeah.
But if we can harness our way of thinking and control our way of thinking to a positive thing and a positive outcome where we really truly want to be, and we really focus on that, we will bring that into our life. It has to. My father lived that, and it showed in his life, and he taught it to me, and it has showed in my life. And I would say, Ben, it's not an easy thing to do at times. There's, lots of times negative things happen to us, and negative thoughts come into our mind. But once we're aware of it, we know it's happening, then it's on us. It's up to us to change that thought, to start thinking about something positive, to start giving energy to what it is that we want in our life, not what we don't want, or some nonsense that's happened to us in the past that we can't change. What do we want in our life? And let's start giving that energy. And once we know that we have that control, we're off to the races.
Yeah. When I first discovered a law of attraction itself and your father's work, I had no money, and within 6 weeks I'd made over £1 million in the stock market, and I had no idea what I was doing. But once I was writing my affirmations, and one day I wrote, I make £60,000 this year, and I had made like maybe 20 that year and had none of it left. And I downloaded this investing app, and something told me to invest in this company. So I invested, and it just blew up. And because I was so focused and because I could see the money going up, I was like, well, this is easy. And I was loving the feeling. And because I was in that vibration, the money kept going up. But then once it started coming down, because I never took any of the money out, once the money started dropping, and it was like £100,000 a day, I could only focus on the loss of money, and I lost it all. So you are completely right in saying you are what you think about most, and where you put your attention, where you put your energy is what you get back. And again, when I started feeling the money going up, and I was like, oh, this is great. And it kept going up. And then when it started coming back down, I could only focus on the negative. So of course it came back down. This was maybe 2 or 3 years ago. So for people who are just getting into this space, maybe it's overwhelming. And when I started, I was like, this is too good to be true. This must be some sort of cult. I was reading these books, and it was like, write down what you want and it'll come true. And I was like, surely not. And then it did. And the synchronicities were insane for me. For someone who's just starting, do you have any exercises that you'd recommend starting to do? Whether it's, I know you love the goal card like your father did too. What comes to mind when you tell people about starting?
Well, I think really the best way to start, Ben, is to write out an affirmation. Write out whatever it is that you're looking to do, how you want to live, how you want to be, how you want to show up. Write it out in a succinct paragraph. It doesn't have to be long. Write out something in the present tense, so as if you are already living that way. Write it out, and then write it every morning. Write it every morning when you wake up. That's one of the first things you do in a day. It may sound a little crazy, and at first, if it's a statement that you're not living in this moment, it will sound like you're lying to yourself, and that's okay. It might not change the way you are today, tomorrow, or even next week. But if you write it out every day, you consciously just make that effort and do it. I promise you, a month from now, 2 months from now, maybe 6 months from now, you will be that person. You will be a different person. That's probably the biggest thing I learned from my father. And he said, why that works is, to learn any new way of living, it takes repetition. You just have to keep doing it. You have to keep doing it. It's like forming a new habit. They're hard at first, but once you get into it, it's easy. And if you write out a positive affirmation of how you want your life to be, and you do that every single day, what's going to happen is this: you start to impress that on your subconscious mind. So your body will start to feel it. And as I say, at first it might feel like a lie, and eventually you'll start to think, you know what, this is possible for me. And then before long, this is me. It just will change over time because of that repetition. The other important thing by doing that, and this is something that the movie The Secret never really covered, is about taking action. And my father was huge on taking action. He says, it's great to think of a thing, but we also have to step out and do something to make that happen in our life. So when we start writing out a positive affirmation every day, it puts us in the frame of mind that we start to think, okay, I do believe that I could do this. Now, what can I do today to step out and bring that closer to me? What small activity, what small something can I do to take action to make that happen for me today? It's like you said about the stock market thing. It would have been wonderful to just think about it, but you had to actually get out and buy a stock and do so. You had to take some kind of action. And you also, you by not selling that stock, that was you took action as well, maybe not in the right way.
Yeah.
But we've got to take action. We've got to step out and do something to bring it to us and to make it happen.
Yeah. Thank you. I also, when the money in the stock market started dropping, when it started dropping was when I stopped my affirmations. I think I got content and thought I didn't need to do them anymore. And then I was in such a dark place mentally for quite a while that when I thought, right, I said to my wife in the nicest way possible, because we were in a bad financial situation before I started TikTok. And I said, look, I need you to be mentally passive because I need to meditate, do my affirmations, visualize. And I was doing that upstairs for like 30 minutes to an hour, going downstairs, and then my wife would say something relatively negative about a situation and it would bring me back down slightly because I allowed it to. So once I got back into my affirmations is when things started to change again for me, maybe the start of this year. But also, what helped as well just after I started investing to make more money was I changed the background on my phone to a quote that says, I'm a millionaire. So as soon as I changed that, I would read it every time I unlocked my phone. And then after 3 days, I would read it subconsciously without knowing that I was reading it. So I was reading it and I would check my phone many times a day, especially watching stocks go like this. So I would read it over and over again, and then it happened. But what also happened is the quote said, I'm a millionaire. And when my investments got to the million, I thought, right, I'll give it a bit now, and then I'll take a couple of million out when it keeps going. So the universe gave me what I asked for. And then from that point, it came all the way back down. So I didn't take it. And then I stopped the affirmations, gone to this dark place. On that note, a lot of my followers are watching and listening here because they are in dark places. And I talk a lot about childhood trauma and things like this. So do you have any different advice maybe for people who are in really bad negative frame of minds and how they could take small steps to becoming happy?
Yeah, you know what, Ben? When you first reached out to me and I took a look at what you were doing, I was really impressed, I have to tell you, because people that are in a dark place, they're the ones that need the help the most. So here's what I would say. My father had a statement that he used to say from the stage that I just loved this statement. He said, you cannot change the time you got out of bed this morning.
Yes.
And what he means by that is that whatever time you got up, that's the time you got up. What has happened in our past has happened in our past. We can't change it. It's happened. But by hanging on to it, by being in a dark place, all we're doing is we're reliving a past bad experience. And it's looping in our head and it blocks us from bringing good into our life. So he said, we cannot change what's happened. So we have to just forgive. We have to let go of what happened. Because if we can let go of that negative, it frees us to live a better version of us now.
Yeah.
And that's it. Now, I know it sounds easy, but it's not as easy to practice. And especially if you're in a dark place, somebody say, well, you have no idea what it's like. I had this happen to me. I had that. I'm not pretending to understand what really bad things are, because I haven't had terrible things happen in my life. I've had bad things, but I know some people have had some terrible things happen. The key is to forgive, to let go, to release that negative so that you can move forward and be the best version of you. And my father had a great thing on forgiveness.
I've got it written here. Yeah.
Yeah, he said, when we forgive something, we don't forgive it for the other person. We don't forgive it for who's ever harmed us. We forgive it for our own being, our own soul, our own way to live and release. You don't ever have to forget what's happened to you in the past. But by forgiving, you release the energy within you. When we hold resentment and want revenge and all the negative emotions that go on in our head because of a past experience, the only person we're harming is ourselves. The person that potentially harmed us, they don't have a clue what's going on in our head. So we're only harming ourselves with that negative self loop. And if you're listening to this, from this moment forward, you're now aware that that negative self loop, what's going on. So it's up to you to switch that with something positive. My father, he had business deals sometimes with people that took advantage of him. And he never harbored resentment towards the person that did business with him. He never did business with him again, but he never harbored resentment because all he knew all he was going to do was hurt himself. So whenever his head would start to go there and he would start to think negative things about something that happened to him, he would switch. He would change his way of thinking. He could maybe pick up one of his dogs. He'd think about something that was more positive. When you're aware of it now, start to think, okay, what can I do to get myself into a positive frame? Who can I think of that is a lovely person, that's caring and loving, that will put me in a better frame? I don't know what that is for you, but there's something in this world that is positive that you can put energy to that will put you in a better state. And that's the key. That's the key. I'm not saying it's always easy, but awareness is everything. And when you're aware that you're letting that negative self loop block you, it's time to make the change.
Yeah. Thank you. There's so much information to unpack, which will be really beneficial for everyone watching, listening there. Especially that quote there, forgiveness is for you, not the other person. To end there, if you don't mind, can we talk about the impression of increase? Because I think for many, many years I've been doing this without knowing what it is. To share that joy and to just elevate as a collectiveness. So if you can talk about that, I would be very grateful.
Yeah, sure. Happy to, Ben. So I'll say what it is, and then I'll explain how I learned it. Is that okay?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. So the impression of increase, this was something my father was really big on. And I personally love it. And what the impression of increase means is that you leave everybody you come in contact with feeling better because they were in contact with you. That's kind of it in its essence. And this is how I learned it. I was 9 years old, so I'm going back a little ways now. I was 9 years old and we were moving to Chicago, or we had just moved to Chicago, and I was about to start a new school. So by that time, it was grade 4. By that time, I was born in Toronto. So I started school in Toronto. We then moved to London, England. So I went to school in London, England. We moved back to a different part of Toronto. I went to another school there. And then we moved to Chicago. So by the time I'm in grade 4, I'm already in 4 different schools. And I was at that point where I hated being that new kid at school. I can still remember it as clear as day. And I remember sitting with Dad in the den of this new home. And it was a day or two before school was to start. And I was nervous. I didn't want to be that new kid, and new country, everything else. And he said to me, he says, Brian, this is what you need to do. When you're in front of anybody, put these 4 letters across their forehead, MMFI, and they stand for make me feel important. If you can make the person that's in front of you feel important, you're going to make friends quickly. People are going to love you, and you're going to get on in this world. And he says, people don't necessarily care as much about you. You don't need to be interesting if you're interested in somebody else. And if you ask questions and really listen and take an interest in who's ever in front of you, pay them a sincere compliment, but be present be in the moment. Don't be looking at your phone or looking around the room. Who else can I talk to? Be in the moment with the person you're talking to, just like you and I are here right now. And if you can do that, he said, you'll make friends so easily. But here's what I love about it, is that by being present and being interested in the person in front of you, that doesn't happen a lot. And you could change that person's day. And depending on how you're interacting with them, you could potentially change the course of their life. It's that powerful. So I started doing that when I was 9 years old, and I have done it ever since. When I was in my 20s, I got into real estate. I was in a real estate career, and I was doing that with all of my clients. I made them feel like they were the most important person in the world, and I was always present with them in the here and now. And I got referrals like crazy because everybody loved dealing with me, and I was a great success in the real estate business. And it's just a good way of living. How many times you've been to a party and you meet that one person and they just keep telling you all about themselves, and it's like, oh my God, I want to get away from this person. But when you meet somebody who's talking to you and is interested in you and is asking you interesting questions, it's an engaging conversation. Boy, you just want to be with that person all night long. That's who you want to be. You want to be somebody that's interested in the other person. And if you can do that, if you can leave whoever you're interacting with feel better because they interacted with you today, that's the impression of increase, and it can change lives.
I'm going to feel better all week because of this discussion, and I can tell that it's it's insane, right? You've called me by my name, which is so important, and I feel like I'm truly engaged here, and you care about this conversation. It's not just another discussion for you. So thank you for. I have one more question for you, but firstly, I just want to say thank you and how grateful I am for your insight here and your wisdom and your time. The question I have for you is, if you could fast forward into the future where you were 80 years old and you looked back on this time in your life right now, what would you be proud of?
You know what, Ben? I would be, and I am already, incredibly proud of how this book has been received. When I wrote this book, I wrote it really as a testament to who my father was, and to everything I learned from my father. This book is not about me. It's really about my father, and it's about everything that he taught me as his son. So the response I've gotten from people that have read it, like yourself, has just been magnificent. And if I was to look back 20 years back from, at myself right now, I would be really proud that I wrote it, that I put it out in the world, and I got something out in the world that's inexpensive. It doesn't cost somebody thousands of dollars to learn. It's a $20 book. And within the pages of that, it literally is everything you need to live a great life. And to me, I'm proud of that. I'm proud of it. And I'm
You
really,
sh-
really happy with the way it's being received.
you should be proud of yourself. The book's done phenomenal, and your father be very proud of you too. For the people watching and listening, where can they find you online? And I know you're in the UK very soon. If you'd like to talk about that, where people can actually come and see you, where can they find you online too?
You can find me online just at brianproctor.com. You can go to my website. You can get on for our newsletter. You can get a copy of the book. There's links there for Amazon, depending on whatever country you're in. And yeah, that's it. It's pretty easy. brianproctor.com. You can find the book on Amazon. The name of the book is My Father Knew the Secret, Growing Up with Bob Proctor. Oh, there you go.